Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mighty Chen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please forgive my morning voice, but this is where it is. I'm happy to continue on reading Peerless Volume 3 with you guys, also known as Wu Shuang by Meng Xi Shi, and we're starting at chapter 103, so I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 103. Tsway Shoo and Feng Xiao sauntered off. The remaining members of the Tsway family sat in the hall, silent for a long time. Tsway-san was mired in guilt. Ultimately, it was his mistake they were all paying for. He said not a word, yearning for everyone to forget he existed. He needn't have worried. Tsway-yong had no attention to spare for him. He'd realized that in his rush to reply to Tsway Shoo, he'd forgotten to inquire about his alias. He hadn't discovered whether the name Feng Xiao was truly related to the Zhejian Bureau, or if Tsway Shoo was simply a fox playing a tiger, using someone else's name to intimidate them. Tsway Da had realized the same thing. He came here in bad faith. I fear he'll stir up trouble at the literary festival tomorrow. Should we drive them out and prevent them from attending? Father Dage, said Tsway Pei. He is still a member of the Tsway family. It's late, and they will have nowhere to go if we turn them out. We should strive for a resolution rather than letting bad blood fester. We must handle this properly. Tsway Da frowned. So long. After so many years, how can you be this naive? If it was reconciliation he sought, why come knocking now? He obviously means to embarrass us before the visiting scholars, the local gentry, and the newly appointed commandery governor. We've wronged him, said Tsway Pei, voice rising. Do you really expect him to come home and thank us for our attentive care in raising him? Were we not generous with him? Tsway Da, too, was growing angry. In any other family, a bastard like him would have been smothered in a cradle. Who else would have let him grow up? Tsway Pei's blood roiled in his chest. All the remorse that dogged him over the years had come to a head upon seeing Tsway Shoo in front of him, and it was this that finally gave him courage to stand up to his eldest brother. This is an ugly thing to say, but it's the truth. It's not him who should have been smothered, nor him who damaged the family reputation. He pointed at Tsway-san, his hand trembling with rage. It's Sugh! Tsway-san leapt to his feet. So long! Why do you go so far to defend that man? Could it be that you also lusted after her? Maybe that bastard is actually yours. Before Tsway Pei could punch him, Tsway Da had already knocked Tsway-san to the floor. The eldest Tsway-san was usually a steady man, yet right now he seemed to be a different person as he called for the servants. San Lang has gone mad, he barked. Gag him and take him away. Tsway-san thrashed and struggled, but was inexorably dragged off. Tsway-yong watched in silence, tacitly supporting his eldest son's decision. Tsway Pei took a deep breath and managed to calm himself. Father, we can't drive them out now. They might go to the county magistrate in anger, and then everyone will know. It won't be pretty. If he really has some connection to the Zhejian Bureau and the news reaches the emperor. Tsway Da interrupted. The emperor handles countless matters every day. Why would he care about something so trivial? Besides, the emperor himself comes from a wealthy family in Guanlong. All the noble houses are connected, and all of them have had their own scandals. If you ask me, we should drive the pair of them out of Boiling before things get any worse. Father! Tsway Pei was furious. When his mother died, the Tsway family exploited the fact that she had no one left. Her reputation suffered, and she wasn't even allowed to be buried with Arlong. That wasn't justice enough. All her child wants is fairness. Why not invite him here and explain everything frankly, then allow my sister-in-law to be interred in the family cemetery? Perhaps we can pacify the anger he's carried with him all these years. Surely that's a good thing. How will letting the incident blow up, reminding everyone of our shame, benefit the Tsway family? Tsway-yong watched his two sons argue fiercely, each unable to persuade the other. Finally, he raised his hand and gestured for quiet. Are you certain you can persuade him? Asked Tsway Pei. After a moment of silence, Tsway said, "As a son of the Tsway family, he should have ranked 5th, but you raised him as a servant and never entered him into our genealogy. Now he's returned, but father, have you changed your mind?" "Letting his mother into the family cemetery is more than generous," Tsway complained. "If we officially acknowledge him, how do you propose we explain it to the public? What will the younger generation think if they find out? It was scandal enough at the time. Do you think you can dress it up now?" Tsway remained silent, looking at Tsway Yong. Now that you've tipped your hand, they're probably going to throw us out." Tsway and Feng Xiao had sauntered back to the neighboring garden. News of what had happened was already spreading among the servants, but without orders from their master, they didn't dare stop the pair. At most, they were subjected to a few peculiar glances. "They won't," said Tsway unruffled. "They'll be arguing themselves in circles. Tsway is afraid we'll grow angry and make our grievances public. Before the literary festival is over, he'll try to pacify us and ensure we don't cause trouble. Only after the county magistrate and scholars have left tomorrow will he come to settle the score. Lady Yu entrusted you to your 4th uncle, Tsway, on her deathbed, yet he failed to protect you. If he'd done his utmost, you'd have had a much happier childhood." "He has a conscience, but he was limited in what he could do," Tsway said coolly. "As an illegitimate child, it was impossible for him to stand up to the entire Tsway family for my sake. If he hadn't been the only person in the family she could rely on, Lady Yu wouldn't have entrusted me to him. People have to look out for themselves first. I bear him no grudge." Feng Xiao smiled. "Perhaps I should thank him. If he'd insisted on keeping you with him, my number of worthy rivals would have decreased by 1. He left the rest of the thought unsaid. "And then my days would have been far duller." Tsway caught his meaning nonetheless. He nodded sympathetically. "I understand. I've seen many like Deputy Chief Feng, people like the Prince of Jin and the 13 floors of Yuan, children blessed by the heavens with above-average talent and intellect, who've never lacked for anything." Feng Xiao hummed and raised his voice in a veiled threat. "Am I only above average when it comes to intellect?" Unfazed, Tsway continued. "But because their paths are so smooth, their lives are boring. They look for ways to meddle and people to harass. Such behavior can only be described as moronic, as well as tragically masochistic." "And yet, I seem to recall that someone was ordered to arrange an alliance with the Gukter Cognate," Feng Xiao retorted. "But after hearing that the envoy from Khotan had been murdered, this man hatched every possible scheme to take the credit for himself. He ended up poisoned by incense of helplessness and almost died, vanquishing the enemy at the cost of crippling himself. Who was that, I wonder? Was he not a masochist?" Tsway lips twitched. "Surely it's because I thought Deputy Chief Feng's life was too boring. I took the initiative to deliver myself to your door." Feng Xiao chuckled. "Now that's what I like to hear. The Tsway family will be thinking that if they enter you into the genealogy as a legitimate member of the clan, you'll be overflowing with gratitude that you'll forget all your past grievances. What foolishness. I admit I pity them. They don't know what Tsway is like at all. How can they think you returned for something so trivial?" Tsway sighed. There was no pity in his expression, only mockery. "They aren't stupid. They've simply been standing at the top for too long, and so they underestimate others." The instant he finished speaking, the Tsway bureau chief's elegant demeanor was undermined by a flurry of sneezes. "Letting yourself get soaked like that with your poor health," Feng Xiao gloated. "At this rate, you'll collapse before you serve the Tsway family their just desserts." Tsway sneezed until his nose burned. His voice was muffled. "I'll be fine after a night's rest. But there's a high chance that Tsway will come to see me. I must ask Deputy Chief Feng to ward him off if you wish to enjoy the spectacle tomorrow." Feng Xiao arched a brow. "What happened to your Tsway guards?" "I've assigned both of them elsewhere. They won't be back until tomorrow." That can't be right." Feng Xiao stopped in his tracks. Tsway held his nose in an attempt to relieve the stinging sensation, but it only made his eyes water. Xiaoxian isn't here, and considering the circumstances, I can't call a doctor. The Tsway family would love it if I perished of illness before dawn. I need to go back to my room, take my medicine, and lie down. I must ask Arlong to see to these trivial matters. Feng Xiao was stunned by his gentle tone, so rarely heard. He met Tsway Shoo's hazy eyes, and for a moment no teasing or clever comebacks came to his lips. Combined with that familiar Arlong, Feng Xiao almost suspected Tsway Shoo had been possessed, though the ghost month was some ways off. As Feng Xiao stared at Tsway Shoo's retreating back, he suddenly remembered something. Wait! Tsway Shoo had already sped out of sight, with no sign of his previous stumbling weakness. So he really was faking most of it, Feng Xiao thought. Had he come here to watch the show, or to be one of Tsway Shoo's guards? He rubbed his chin and seriously considered the question. During the 5th month, the pomegranates were abloom. In fact, pomegranates blossomed throughout the summer. This year's gathering had been dubbed a literary festival on the subject of pomegranate flowers, but the pomegranates were only a temporary addition. Last year, the theme had been Right General Wang's Orchid Pavilion instead. Though the subject changed each year, the overall structure remained the same. All right, you guys, there is a footnote about Right General Wang's Orchid Pavilion. The footnote says, Wang Xizhi's Lanting-ji Xu, preface to the poems collected from the Orchid Pavilion, or Lanting Xu, Orchid Pavilion Preface, is a piece of Chinese calligraphy work generally considered to be written by the well-known calligrapher Wang Xizhi from the Eastern Jin Dynasty. All right, back to the reading. The Tsway clan's literary festival was renowned throughout Boiling Commandery. In fact, throughout the whole of the north. Many participants traveled there each year, all of them hoping for a chance at overnight fame. Some were scholars who made a name for themselves elsewhere. In the past, Boiling's commandery governors had been known for their love of talented men and could be expected to attend every year as a distinguished guest. An outstanding performance could earn one the governor's recommendation to become an official themselves. With a change in dynasty, a new commandery governor had been appointed. Still, to express his fellowship with the people, he'd confirmed that he too would attend and partake in the festivities. The festival was set to take place in one of the Tsway family's many gardens, this one bordering an area of the countryside that babbled with streams. Pear blossoms, yet to wither, still clung to the branches, and the ponds of the garden shone pristine as mirrors. Several pomegranate trees had been planted in a gorgeous arrangement. The wooden gate at the entrance had been left slightly ajar, so that anyone could enter and leave as they pleased. Maids came and went carrying fruit and wine, all of them beautifully attired and anointed with fresh fragrance. The scholars came in their billowing, wide-sleeved robes, their hair bound up with jade hairpins and silk ribbons. The whole made for a dazzling sight. Tsway stood at Tsway Yong's side, introducing to him the many distinguished guests who'd come to pay their respects. Among them were senior scholars more prestigious than Tsway, as well as old friends with whom he'd sometimes recited poetry. Tsway literary talent was such that even if he didn't take first place at the festival today, he was sure to capture the attention of the crowd. Yet for some reason, he felt uneasy. His eyelids kept twitching, an ill omen. Tsway had been greeting guests elsewhere, but now found an opportunity to pull Tsway aside. "What did he say when you went to see him last night?" he whispered. Tsway gave a strained smile. "He was unwell from being caught in the rain and went to rest. His friend stopped me before I could see him." "What impudence!" Tsway frowned. "He must be waiting for us to make him an even better offer." "I don't think he's that kind of person, Daka. If that's what he was after, he would have come back long before this. The Tsway family has failed him." Tsway disagreed. He has some kind of relationship with the Zhejiang Bureau, and he thinks he can use it to threaten us. That's why he's acting so high and mighty. He believes he'll return in glory. Well, whatever trouble he plans to stir up today, we won't let it happen. I've sent men to keep an eye on them, and the moment they say or do anything they shouldn't, we'll have them carted away." As they spoke, the commandery governor and county magistrate both arrived, surrounded by commandery officials of all ranks. The atmosphere grew livelier still. Tsway Daolang hadn't time to say anything more. He stepped up at once to help his father forward as they greeted the officials. Tsway Pei ran his eyes over the crowd, finally locating Tsway Buchu with a throng of dark heads. He was neither near nor far, standing under a pear tree beside Feng Xiao with a cheerful smile on his face. He looked just like every other attendee, ready to join the festivities. The elegance of the pear blossoms heightened Feng Xiao's matchless charm. Even Tsway Pei, whose focus was Tsway Buchu, found his attention straying to him. Tsway Pei suddenly realized Tsway Buchu had used the false name of Feng Xiao. Could his friend also be using an alias? Surely a man like that, who exuded the air of a flawless jade, couldn't be a person of such little fame and import. At the other side of the garden, Tsway Yong brimmed with enthusiasm. He greeted the county magistrate and the other important attendees, then stood and bowed to everyone present. After speaking a few words about the original purpose of the festival and expressing his welcome, he said, "This year, we have more attendees than ever before. We are surrounded by distinguished friends and guests. This old man will declare it now. We are certain to produce a legendary masterpiece today. As a gesture of goodwill, I shall bestow a prize upon the most exceptional poet, the antique zither, Yue-in." Oh. Chapter 104. At the sound of the zither's name, Feng Xiao sneezed. No, that can't be right at all. He rubbed his nose. Beside him, Tsway Buchu was in a good mood. "You've been saying that can't be right since last night. What's not right?" Feng Xiao snorted. "Nothing is right." Tsway Buchu let it drop. "I didn't expect Tsway Yong would offer Yuan as the prize. Tell me, will you steal it openly or in secret?" Feng Xiao looked over at the zither. His vision was sharp. Despite the distance, he could see the instrument clearly. Tsway Yong plucked a few strings. The notes of the zither rippled out, striking hearts throughout the crowd. It was indeed a beautiful zither. In the hands of a proficient musician, a zither like this could produce heavenly music. In the hands of a martial artist, with profound internal energy, the results it might produce were unfathomable. Yuan wasn't the finest zither in the world, and obtaining it wasn't an absolute necessity for Feng Xiao. But now that he'd seen it, and it was within his reach, allowing it to slip through his fingers would be too great a pity. He had already been considering how to obtain the zither when Tsway Buchu asked his question. He raised a brow. "What do you mean? I'll simply dazzle them with my poetry. Then won't Tsway Yong have to give it to me?" "I didn't expect Deputy Chief Feng to be a greater poet than anyone else present," Tsway Buchu said in surprise. "Why not let me hear your poem first?" Feng Xiao snorted. "My poem has the value equal to Yuan. What will you offer me if I let you hear it first?" Tsway Buchu remained silent for a moment, then said, "Alas, this Tsway's sleeves are completely empty. You must save it to surprise the audience." Around them, Tsway Yong's declaration had made quite the splash. The vast majority of those present didn't know martial arts, but they'd heard of Yuan. Even if they hadn't, they knew any zither Tsway Yong was willing to offer as a prize had to be a famous one. Some of those who'd only come to watch the excitement now began trying to compose the most brilliant poems they could think of. Tsway Yong smiled and stroked his beard as he chatted with the commandery governor. Whether intentionally or not, his gaze strayed to Tsway Buchu. Feng Xiao marked it even before Tsway Buchu did. "Look how you frightened him. He's like a bird startled at the twang of a bow. How long until you put him out of his misery?" Feng Xiao jibed. "Wait a moment." Tsway Buchu's gaze fell on the man beside Tsway Yong. He took a step forward before Feng Xiao grabbed his wrist, forcing Tsway Buchu to turn back to him. the new commandery governor is also an old acquaintance from those days, he confessed. There weren't many left in the Yue family, and they'd already met all the relevant members of the Tsway clan. Feng Xiao thought back to the story Tsway Shoo had told. Lady Yu's Shishong? Tsway Shoo nodded. Yuan Sheng lost his parents at a young age. Patriarch Yu recognized his aptitude and took him as a disciple, teaching him with great care. But one day he vanished. Though Yuan Sheng left behind a letter, his exact whereabouts were a mystery. In truth, he went traveling across both the north and south, and was later recommended as an official. They gave him the title Yuan Sansi, which he began using. His first position was as a county magistrate in Hua County, and it seems he's now been promoted to the governor of Boiling Commandery. You might say he's earned himself quite a bit of glory. Perhaps Yuan Sheng had been transferred here by chance, or perhaps at some point he'd quietly returned to visit his family and became angry upon learning their sorry fate. If that was the case, there was a chance that he, too, was plotting revenge. Whatever the truth, it didn't change Tsway Shoo's plans. He was a man who always finished what he started. Still, a long-lost acquaintance had resurfaced. It made sense to go and speak to him about his mother. Feng Xiao released his wrist and shooed him off as one might a puppy or a kitten. Go. Very soon now, my venerable self will start displaying my poetic talents. Tsway Shoo gave him a long, skeptical look before leaving. Waving his fan, Feng Xiao slipped into the crowd with a smile. During the 5th month, the pomegranate flowers bloom, recited a young scholar in a white robe and a black sash. Another scholar beside him was writing with incredible speed, transcribing everyone's poems. Several locally famous scholars had been selected to judge. One was an elderly man who'd served as a high-ranking official in the imperial court of the previous dynasty, and was currently one of the leaders of the northern literary world. Although the theme of the festival was pomegranates, the poems themselves could be about anything. It was a gathering of talents, a delicious feast. Any topic was allowed. If someone wanted to experiment, they could perform a tragic quatrain. As long as the poem was outstanding, the poet was certain to become famous. Everyone was racking their brains for the perfect composition. Some had come with their masterpieces already written and perfectly memorized in hopes of drawing the eye of the famous scholars present. As for those who'd already made names for themselves, an exceptional performance was a must, lest they fail to live up to their own reputations. The young scholar finished reciting his poem and nervously awaited his assessment. The old judges didn't embarrass him. They only smiled. A charming piece, an above-average entry. The scholar knew they meant his poem was mediocre and unremarkable. Forget ranking in the top 3. He'd be lucky to make the top 10. The young man was crestfallen, but dared not show it. He politely cupped his hands and sat down, vacating the stage for the next participant. When it came to poetry, only talent mattered. Anyone could memorize a few books and copy some flowery prose. Even if they didn't capture the essence of the work, simply mimicry wasn't difficult. But masterpieces that could draw applause from the audience weren't composed through willpower alone. Since the Wei and Jin dynasties, only a few geniuses capable of such work had emerged, such as the 3 Tsah-ohs and Lingyun. Okay, reading the book note. The 3 Tsah-ohs refers to the famous trio of Cao, Cao Pi, and Cao Zhi of the Three Kingdoms era, who were talented poets on top of being statesmen and warlords. Ling-you-in, also known as the Duke of Kangla, was one of the greatest poets during the Southern and Northern dynasties era. Amid this grand gathering of scholars, one man stepped out of the crowd, his voice ringing out across the garden for everyone to hear. I, a man of some talent, have fallen in love with Yue-yin at first sight. I am here to present some poems. If they meet the conditions proposed of Duke Tsway, I ask him to be generous. The speaker was, of course, Feng Xiao. As the crowd turned their heads, many saw only a blinding radiance. This man's face was as resplendent as a phoenix diving into a painting, like the spring sun shining down, bathing the entire garden in its glow. Tsway frowned slightly. He'd just seen Tsway approach the new commandery governor. He couldn't stop him without making a scene, so he'd sent Tsway along to keep an eye on him. If Tsway said something he oughtn't, he'd drag him away. If worse came to worse, he'd apologize to the governor for his wayward guests. But he hadn't expected Feng Xiao to appear at just that moment. Still, they were only two men. What could they do? Even if they shouted the entire story in front of everyone, Tsway had ways of dealing with it. The trouble was, as long as they followed every rule, there was little Tsway could do. People were naturally inclined to indulge a beautiful face. The white-haired old judge had once been a lofty official at the head of the 6 ministries, but he was no exception. He joked, "If this young friend has truly composed a masterpiece, I'll still the zither myself and present it to you if Duke Tsway regrets his generosity." Feng Xiao smiled. "Thank you very much. I have composed a short quatrain." The old man nodded. "Whenever you're ready." The crowd pricked up their ears, waiting to hear what kind of earth-shattering masterpiece this handsome young man had composed. Feng Xiao's thin lips parted as he recited. "In the 5th month, the pomegranate blooms. Boiling holds a grand celebration. The wise pursue fame and fortune, but I am here for Yuan." Silence. Awkward silence. A silence in which even the spring warblers forgot to chirp. Everyone remained unmoving, their smiles frozen on their faces. Dear gods! In all the literary festivals ever held by the Tsway family, they'd never heard such a terrible poem. It couldn't even be called one. At most, it was free verse, and exceedingly mediocre verse at that. The crowd was certainly moved, but it wasn't with wonder. Where did this dunce come from? Why would anyone embarrass themselves by bringing such shameful stuff to the literary festival? Even the white-haired old man who'd been charmed by Feng Xiao struggled to force a smile. "My young friend, this poem isn't up to par. You have much room to improve. Please spend more time practicing." Tsway nearly laughed his head off. Just what kind of ally had Tsway brought with him? He was as useful as a glass hammer. Feng Xiao didn't appear remotely embarrassed. "Didn't Duke Tsway say the most outstanding poet would receive Yuan as a gift? I've done my part. Will you go back on your word?" "If I give you Yuan for this piece that can't even be called a poem, I fear everyone will speculate that you're my long-lost grandson," said Tsway coolly. The crowd burst out laughing at Duke Tsway's quip. Feng Xiao was unfazed. As the saying goes, there's no first place among literary scholars and no second place among martial artists. Everyone has their own opinions on what makes good poetry. This is a matter of personal taste. It's bad poetry anyone can recognize. You said the most exceptional poet would receive Yuan, but you didn't specify whether it had to be exceptionally good. If the poem was exceptionally bad, I'd say it meets the requirements. Why? Tsway lips twitched. "Young man, that's enough of your nonsense. You may go." Everyone stared perplexedly at Feng Xiao. Either something was wrong with this man's head, or he was purposely acting the boor to get attention. Feng Xiao took not a whit of it to heart, but continued smiling brightly. Since Tsway had told him to leave, he obediently sauntered off, waving his fan. Several ladies who didn't care whether his poetry was good or bad flocked to him and began to ask questions, earning him jealous looks from the other men. The newly appointed commandery governor, Yuan Sansi, gazed at the wan young man who'd approached him during the commotion. He waved a hand and sent his attendants away. "Can I help you?" Normally, it was impossible for a commoner to have a face-to-face conversation with the commandery governor, But this was a literary festival, and many of the attendees were rising talents. The commandery governor was here to enjoy the festivities with the people. It wouldn't do to put on airs. But more significantly, when he saw Tsway Shoo, he inexplicably felt as though he'd seen this young man's face before. Tsway Shoo nodded. There's about to be a lot of excitement. The commandery governor need not intervene. Merely watch from the sidelines. Afterward, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. Please don't leave too quickly. Yuan Sansa was puzzled enough to let Tsway Shoo's lack of etiquette slide. What excitement? Tsway Shoo glanced at the approaching Tsway Dalong and smiled. The Tsway family is in bed with the Southern Dynasty. That kind of excitement. Tsway Dalong had been watching Tsway Shoo speak to the commandery governor. There was something strange about Tsway Shoo, an indescribable dissonance in his attitude and demeanor. Tsway Shoo was not an official, and he had no family behind him. Yet he was neither haughty nor humble as he spoke to the commandery governor. Rather, he had an air of a superior speaking to a subordinate. Truly, Tsway Dalong thought, this man had a bloated opinion of himself. Yet just as he got within earshot, he heard those words, "The Tsway family is in bed with the Southern Dynasty," and his face went white. "What slander is this?" he shouted on instinct. Yuan Sansa's eyes widened in surprise. His gaze moved between the two of them, but he was a wise man. He remained quiet, waiting to see what came of this. Tsway Dalong had none of Yuan Sansa's composure. He was panicked. Tsway Shoo gave him a small smile. "Is it slander? You should ask yourself. Tell me, did you do it of your own initiative, or was it on Tsway Yong's orders? Are the other members of the Tsway family involved? If you come clean now, you might still have a chance to save them, but not for much longer." Tsway Dalong steadied his voice with great effort. "Jie, I know you hold a grudge against the Tsway family for your childhood, but the Tsway family was merely trying to preserve your mother's reputation and protect you. If the circumstances of your birth were made public, could you withstand the rumors and judgment?" Yuan Sansa could no longer remain silent. "What are you talking about? What reputation? What circumstances?" The corner of Tsway Shoo's lips curled up as he spoke, his tone uncommonly gentle. "Perhaps you don't yet know the new commandery governor's original name. He was once called Yuan Sheng, and he was my grandfather's pupil. He was also Lady Yu's Shishong, who left home as a young man and was thought to have vanished." Tsway Shoo wasn't surprised to see both of them staring at him in shock and bewilderment. Yuan Sansa because he'd mentioned Lady Yu, and Tsway Dalong because Yuan Sansa's background. These were old events, thought to have been buried in yellow soil, never to see the sun again. Who would have thought that one day old acquaintances would reunite and those presumed dead would still walk the world, or that those who disappeared would return with a new identity? The moment stretched. Tsway Dalong's face remained calm, but a storm was brewing in his heart. Tsway Shoo didn't give him the chance to stop and think. "Since you've forgone your last chance to come clean, don't blame me for being ruthless." Before Tsway Dalong could digest these words, Tsway Shoo raised his voice. "Come forward." Who should come forward? And from where? Tsway Dalong was still half a step behind as he turned to look over the heads of the crowd. Black-clad guards had suddenly appeared throughout the garden. They silently streamed toward Tsway Shoo and went down on one knee before him. "How did it go?" asked Tsway Shoo coldly. "Everything has been settled, Lord Chief." The leader bowed his head. 2 days prior, he'd received a secret order from Tsway Shoo instructing him to bring a large number of Zoya guards from Yecheng. They had been waiting for this moment to capture the entire Tsway family in one fell swoop. Tsway Shoo had brought 2 Zoya guards with him, one to gather the men, and the other to infiltrate the Tsway manor in search for evidence. After Tsway Shoo had revealed his identity, the Tsway family had been thrown into chaos. They'd been too busy to pay attention to comings and goings in the manor. The guard had completed his task with ease. Surround the garden and arrest Tsway Da. He can take you to his study and bedroom so you may search them, Tsway Shoo said, greatly satisfied. Tsway Da Long was still wondering if he was dreaming when his arms were twisted up behind his back. Let go of me! Let go of me! Tsway Jie, you traitor! You bastard! The appearance of the Tsway guards combined with Tsway Da Long's shouting caught everyone's attention. Tsway Yong hurried over, stunned. You there! Let him go! What's the meaning of this? Tsway Shoo casually produced a token, spinning it several times between his fingers before throwing it to the Tsway guard. The man caught it and held it aloft. Our lord is the chief of the Tsway Bureau, personally appointed by His Majesty. Under orders from the throne, he has investigated the Tsway family's collusion with the Southern Dynasty. For the past 4 years, Tsway Shoo, the eldest son of the Tsway family, has been secretly aiding the Southern Dynasty's Lingyun Academy. 3 years ago, a disciple of Lingyun Academy, Yue Gu, tried and failed to assassinate our Emperor of Tsway. As he fled, he passed through Boling, where Tsway Shoo helped him hide several days. 1 year ago, the north suffered severe drought and famine. The court opened the granaries to distribute grain, appointing officials to provide aid. But Tsway Shoo secretly conspired with Yue Gu. He spread rumors that the court was unwilling to give aid and that the victims would be left to fend for themselves. Yue Gu's outlaw friends then took the grain for themselves and sent it south, leaving the refugees to starve and drive them to revolt. Tsway Da Long's face grew paler with every word. Tsway Yong stared at his eldest son in disbelief. The Tsway family had stood tall for generations. The change of dynasties hadn't shaken their foundations. No matter the dynasty or generation, all emperors solely needed talent, and the Tsway family had produced many talented people. It was this that supported their noble status. The division of the Central Plains into North and South had caused great turmoil. Countless heroes had emerged, all hoping to make their mark on history. While the aristocratic families had guarded their own interests, Tsway Yong had seen that the Emperor of Tsway was skilled and wise, so he'd become partial to the Northern Dynasty. But of all his sons, only Tsway Pei possessed the potential to become an official in the emperor's government, and so he'd focused his remaining attention on his eldest grandson, Tsway Fei. He couldn't possibly have imagined his eldest son would do something like this behind his back. Tsway Da Long's reaction made his guilt abundantly clear. The crowd watched in shock, intimidated into silence by the Tsway guards, surrounded by those black-clad figures. The sickly young man's authority seemed to settle over him like a bright cloak. No one dared to look him in the eye. Tsway Pei had seen his eldest brother head toward Tsway Shoo. Worried Tsway Da Long would confront him, he'd followed to help, but had instead been treated to the sight of his brother arrested. He stood frozen in place. Tsway Junyang had been standing beside Feng Xiao, chatting with him. Now, she turned to look at him in confusion. If he's the chief of the Tsway Bureau, then who are you? Chapter 105. Tsway Yong didn't hear Tsway Junyang's question, nor did he hear Feng Xiao's response. At the moment, he solely focused on the disaster unfolding in front of him. He'd thought Tsway Shoo would at most go public with his story, or that he might find an opportunity to approach the commandery governor and apply to him for justice. Either way, Tsway Yong had been confident the Tsway family could handle it. Tsway Shoo was only one man, after all, and one man up against the entire Tsway family was like an egg striking a stone. The egg would end up smashed, and the stone unmoved. As long as Tsway Shoo understood that, Tsway Yong was prepared to be magnanimous. He'd let him study with Tsway Pei, or perhaps give him one of the Tsway family shops to manage. With a judicious application of carrot and stick, Tsway Yong would soon force his surrender. In this world, one's parents were one's greatest source of support. Some might be able to rely on their wife's family, but Tsway Shoo had no parents, and was sickly to boot. How could he have a wife, let alone in-laws willing to back him? Merely surviving this long had been hard enough. If the Tsway family was willing to relent and let him stay, that was more than generous. They owed him nothing further. What was more, if Tsway Shoo had returned to squeeze what he could out of the Tsway clan, then exposing his own sordid background wouldn't help him. As long as Tsway Shoo had half a brain, he wouldn't do anything so foolish. Tsway had never expected Tsway Shoo would instead target Tsway Da-lang. The Tswoye guards, clad in black and carrying long sabers, were an imposing sight, yet they knelt to Tsway Shoo. Tsway could no longer deceive himself. The Tsway Shoo of the present was not the sickly, helpless child of the past. This was not a man the Tsway family could walk all over, or treat however they wished. For the first time in his life, Tsway understood what it was to be at a complete loss. He couldn't question his eldest son in public, lest Tsway Da-lang incriminate himself further. He bit the inside of his cheek and squashed down his fury. If Tsway Shoo has committed some crime, the commandery governor is the one with the prerogative to arrest and interrogate him, not you. Useless as it was, he moved to stand between his eldest son and Tsway Shoo. This is a case of great importance, Tsway Shoo said coldly. Special circumstances call for special measures. There is no need to follow the common procedure. Take him away. Wait a minute! Tsway Da-lang was silent, his face the color of ash, but Tsway continued to struggle futilely. On what basis do you make this arrest? You speak of evidence, but you haven't provided any. You can't expect us to simply accept it. Our Tsway family has hundreds of years of history, not because of an emperor's favor, but thanks to our integrity and reputation. If you arrest my son today, you will lose the trust of every noble clan across the land. We shall request an audience with the emperor and demand justice. There were many nobles present, all of them from influential clans. Tsway interests aligned with their own, and he had indeed raised some concerning points. Many began to raise their voices in pleas of mercy. The county magistrate spoke up as well. Today is a grand occasion. Even if there is merit to these accusations, can we not wait until the literary festival is over before taking anyone into custody? Everyone nodded in agreement. Some even asked Commandery Governor Yuan to step forward. But the newly promoted Governor Yuan didn't side with the people as they expected. He showed none of his previous geniality, but remained silent, watching from the sidelines. Tsway Shoo looked at Tsway and saw the threat lurking in his eyes. Today, Tsway Shoo had witnessed just how far a noble family's influence could stretch. If he detained Tsway Da-lang now, within a few days, the emperor's desk would be piled with countless memorials requesting Tsway Shoo's impeachment. The common wisdom that aristocratic families stuck together was perfectly true, and the Tsway family of Boling was using those connections to the fullest. Unfortunately, the person they were up against was Tsway Shoo. Tsway Shoo didn't even blink. He raised his hand and twitched his fingers in a signal. And the Tswoye guards, heedless of anyone else, dragged Tsway Shoo away. Tsway Shoo is engaged in traitorous dealings with a foreign nation, Tsway Shoo said. The evidence is conclusive. He will be taken back to the capital and handed over to the Ministry of Justice, the Court of Judicial Review, the Censorate, and the Tswoye Bureau for a joint trial. If you have any objections, you may go to the capital yourself and file a complaint. If I discover anyone here is an accomplice, I fear your complaint will come to nothing. Instead, you'll find yourself accompanying Tsway Shoo. This is what we call sharing life and death, a loyalty that reaches beyond the clouds. His voice was gentle, but as his gaze raked over the crowd, no one dared to meet his eyes. Despair surged over Tsway. It seemed no one would be willing to fight Tsway Shoo for the Tsway family. "Father, save me! Save me!" Tsway Da-lang shouted. His voice gradually faded into the distance. That was his son, his own flesh and blood. Tsway heart ached. He couldn't take it anymore. He dragged his elderly body forward and stumbled. Only Tsway Pei's quick action saved him from a fall as he caught his father and held him up. You You're using your office to satisfy your personal grudges. Tsway Yong's eyes were bloodshot and staring as he snarled at Tsway Shoo. Tsway Shoo raised an eyebrow. You jest. What grudge could I possibly have against the Tsway family? You clearly hold a grudge over your mother's death, blurted Tsway Yong. Ever since you were young. Father! Tsway Pei's voice broke Tsway Yong back to his senses. He abruptly fell silent, his lips trembling. What could he say? Should he reveal Lady Yu's identity and Tsway Shoo's parentage? It would only invite further humiliation. Tsway Shoo smiled at him, as if certain he wouldn't dare. The smile struck Tsway Yong like a blow. His chest tightened, and he couldn't breathe. Tsway Yue Bureau. Tsway Yue Chief. Who could have imagined that after many years of drifting, Tsway Shoo had not only ended up living well, but had amassed authority and status far beyond that of the ordinary man? Had he been merely a common official, a county magistrate, or a commandery governor, the Tsway family would have no cause to fear him. But Tsway Shoo had soared straight to the heavens. He was still young, yet he was already the chief of the Tsway Yue Bureau. In comparison, despite being a few years older, Tsway Yong's eldest grandson was but a scholar of small renown. Tsway Yong burned with regret. If only he'd relented last night and promised Tsway Pei he'd allow Tsway Jie into the genealogy. Perhaps then this all could have been avoided. But what good was if only? Just as when Dr. Suen had falsely claimed Tsway Jie to be dead, if only they had made certain. But no one had doubted him or sought to investigate, because back then they'd thought nothing of Tsway Jie. Tsway Pei was even more conflicted than Tsway Yong. He was weighed down by guilt. He couldn't muster any words of remonstrance, but neither could he merely watch as his elderly brother was hauled away. Tsway, Chief Tsway, he pleaded, my father's birthday is in half a month. Can't you please show my brother some clemency and carry out the arrest after that? Tsway Shoo looked at him quizzically. Why not ask me to wait until his birthday next year, or the year after that? It was a clear rejection. Tsway Pei was filled with anguish. Bad luck came in threes, and it seemed that today the heavens were determined to throw misfortune after misfortune at the Tsway family. Moments after Tsway Dalang had been taken away, the assistant county magistrate and a group of constables arrived with news of an incident at the Tsway family's pharmacy at Bao Ning Hall. Dr. Suen had prescribed a patient the wrong medicine, killing them. He'd been arrested, but everyone who'd been present on the day the medicine was prescribed had to be taken for questioning, including Tsway Sahn and the pharmacy staff. The staff had already been rounded up, but as Tsway Sahn was at the Tsway residence, the assistant county magistrate had shown up on his doorstep with the constables to fetch him. The county magistrate knew the Boiling Tsway clan was powerful, and today was the day of their literary festival. He didn't expect things to go smoothly and had planned to wait until the festival's conclusion to privately discuss the matter with the county magistrate. But then Tsway Shoo had surprised everyone by arresting Tsway Dalang, and the assistant county magistrate had realized this was a prime opportunity. He summoned his men and made his approach. When it rained, it poured. Tsway Yong's hoary head seemed to go whither still. He spared not a glance for the county magistrate with his troubled expression, but pointed at Tsway Shoo and said in a trembling voice, All right, you've won. Tsway Shoo didn't bother trying to explain that this new disturbance had nothing to do with him. He turned to the county magistrate. Since there has been a death, you should make your arrest. However, I'd like to come with you to observe the case. May I? Governor Yuan, who so far had remained silent, spoke up as well. I'll also take a look. The great and mighty gods had spoken, and the county magistrate dared not refuse. This way, please. Tsway Shoo and Governor Yuan departed, leaving the guests to stare at each other. No one had the heart to continue reciting poetry. One after another, they rose and made their farewells. Tsway Yong was in no mood to see them off. He left the duty to Tsway Pei and the steward, while the servants supported him back to his study to sit down. Upon hearing the news, the women of the Tsway family rushed over to beg Tsway Yong to save the men, but Tsway Yong knew, even if he managed to extricate Tsway Sahn from his difficulties, there was no hope of escape for Tsway Dalong. Only one person could have saved him, but that man was only too eager to see the Tsway family humiliated. He had no reason to help them. Tsway Pei had bidden farewell to the last of the guests, and now pushed open the door and entered the study. His heart ached when he saw Tsway Yong, who seemed to have aged years in an instant. His father raised his head and asked heavily, "If I personally knelt before him and begged, do you think he'd show us mercy?" Tsway Pei knew at once whom he meant. After a moment's silence, he answered truthfully, "I fear he would not." Tsway Yong closed his eyes. "The fault is mine. I was indecisive. Either do it or don't. I wavered, and thus sowed the seeds of our destruction." "Father!" exclaimed Tsway Pei in shock. What Tsway Yong regretted was not how reprehensibly he treated Tsway Shoo, but that he hadn't pulled the weed up by its roots and finished him off when he'd had the chance. "In truth, of all my sons, you're the one I value the most," said Tsway Yong dully. "Your wisdom and cleverness far surpass those of your brothers. Your only shortcoming is that you're too soft-hearted, an unfortunate weakness." Tsway Pei went quiet. "Did Daga really collude with the Southern Dynasty?" Tsway Yong smiled wryly. "Daga is diligent, but lacking in talent. He's always been that way. As his father, I coddled him, afraid he wouldn't be able to shoulder his duties. How could I have guessed he'd take such a risk to prove himself?" Just now, Tsway, he said the accusations against Daga will need to pass 4 rounds of joint review. There's a chance yet for us to salvage this, but the incident at Baoning Hall must be taken care of today. Dr. Yuan has saved countless of our people. How could he write the wrong prescription and kill someone? There must be more to this. Father, please think of a way to save him." "You needn't worry." Tsway Yong's voice was cold. "If Sun Jimin hadn't helped him, how could that bastard have faked his death and escaped? If that man has a shred of conscience, he'll find a way to absolve Sun Jimin of his crime." Tsway Pei was stunned. He looked upon his father as if seeing a stranger. A knock at the door broke the stifling silence. Tsway Junyang's voice came from beyond the door. "Grandfather, I must speak to you." Tsway Pei took a deep breath and reordered his spiraling thoughts. He opened the door and whispered, "Junyang, go and rest. Fourth uncle, listen to me," she cut in. "The man accompanying the Zuoye chief is the deputy chief of the Jiejian Bureau, Feng Xiao. I've heard the Jiejian and Zuoye bureaus are independent organizations. They each hold their own authority, and neither is subordinate to the other. If you can get Feng Gongzi to put in a good word for us, maybe we can save first uncle and father." Tsway Pei was taken aback. "Is this true?" Tsway Junyang nodded repeatedly. "I entered the city with him. Feng Gongzi really doesn't act like he's Tsway Gongzi's subordinate. They bickered the entire way here. They don't seem to be friends." Tsway Pei looked back at Tsway Yong. "Has he left?" asked Tsway Yong. "I pleaded with him to stay. He's remaining here a little longer." Tsway Yong pondered a moment. "Junyang, no, Sulang, you go with Junyang and invite him here." Feng Xiao was indeed still there. He hadn't left the festival with Tsway Shoo. Instead, he strolled the length of the garden with Junyang at his side, admiring the colorful blooms. He was content and carefree, a stark contrast to the anxiety suffocating the Tsway family. When Tsway Junyang returned with Tsway Pei to invite him inside, he smiled but did not look surprised. "I thought Duke Tsway would come himself." Solemnly, Tsway Pei cupped his hands. "My father has just suffered a great shock and is feeling unwell. Merely walking is difficult for him at the moment. I can only ask Feng Gongzi to deign to visit him. We beg your forgiveness." Feeling unwell? Feng Xiao smiled impishly. Tsway suffers from both asthma and an affliction of the heart. Surely he's been feeling unwell since birth. Tsway smiled wryly. "Are you trying to defend Tsway Gongzi? It seems father's plea is hopeless indeed." "How do you know there's no hope before your father has spoken to me?" said Feng Xiao. "Maybe he can offer something that will satisfy me." He raised his fan, a refined gesture that revealed his own high status. "Lead the way." Tsway heart was a tangle of emotions. Halfway back to the study, he couldn't resist asking low-voiced, "Has Tsui Jie fared well these years?" "Who is Tsui Jie?" "A slip of the tongue," said Tsway dully. "Indeed, no one would want such a name." Feng Xiao smiled. Every one of his subordinates treats him like a priceless treasure. They're terrified of him encountering the slightest hardship and would die for him in an instant. What do you think? Is he faring well?" "Of course, he's faring very well," Tsway said hoarsely. "If you left the Tsway family, you'd lose at least half of your value. He, on the other hand, doesn't need the Tsway name to be Tsway Buchu." Tsway Junyang only followed half of the winding implications of this exchange. Her face showed puzzlement. Tsway Pei fell silent, unwilling to embarrass himself further. "Father really did commit a great wrong," he thought. Not because he'd failed to kill Tsway Buchu and silence him, but because he'd allowed him to be born, yet never showed him any love. If he had, would he now be worrying about his lack of worthy successors? At last, Tsway saw Feng Xiao arrive. To him, those 15 minutes he'd waited seemed to have lasted half a lifetime. He waved Tsway and Tsway Junyang out, then stumbled to his feet and knelt before Feng Xiao. "I plead with Feng Gongzi to save Tsway Shoo's life." Feng Xiao's mouth curved with interest. "Why should I save him?" He didn't urge Tsway to stand, so Tsway endured the pain in his knees as he prostrated himself. "The Jiejian Bureau was personally established by the Emperor. You have an immense authority not inferior to the Zuoye Bureau. Out of everyone in Boling, you're the only one who can save Dalang's life. I understand that Feng Gongzi is a man of sophisticated tastes and that ordinary objects hold no interest for you. I am willing to gift you Yue-in, as well as Emperor Wu of Han's beloved vessel of white nephrite jade." Feng Xiao smiled. "Didn't Duke Tsway disparage my poem today? You said if you gave me Yue-in, everyone would think I'm your grandson." Tsway bowed his head. "I was too blind to recognize greatness and spoke out of ignorance. I beg Feng Gongzi's forgiveness." "In that case, does Duke Tsway think my poem was good?" Tsway had never lowered himself to plead like this before, but for the sake of his eldest son's life, he had no choice. He mentally held his nose and lied. "Your lordship's poetry is refreshing and refined. It carries the flair of the Wei and Jin dynasties and is unparalleled in your generation. Though it at first appeared vulgar, it is in fact elegant. This old fool has poor eyesight and failed to give it due consideration before speaking recklessly. I slandered your lordship and misunderstood your painstaking efforts. I shall write something to clear your good name in the future." He forced this flowery praise through his teeth with a deadened expression, feeling nauseated. But Feng Xiao seemed enormously pleased. He said gleefully, "It appears Duke Tsway isn't very happy to accept me as your grandson." Tsway made himself smile. "How could I deserve something like that? Your lordship is a magnanimous man. I beg your lenience." Feng Xiao shook his head. "So the eldest son of the Tsway family is only worth a zither and a jade bottle. Isn't that a bit too cheap?" So he wanted to haggle. Tsway ground his molars, but there was nothing he could do. "I have 4 granddaughters. Of the 4, Junyang is the prettiest. She's also well-learned and well-mannered. If your lordship is amenable, I can offer her as your wife. As a wife? Then I'd really become your grandson-in-law. Tsway closed his eyes, hopelessness welling up in his heart. But since he'd already come this far, there was no room for regrets. As a wife, or as a concubine, whatever your lordship wishes. Well, well, well. That is the end of the reading of chapters 103 through 105, and it was funny. It was quite, I wish I was there to see all of this unravel, because boy, was that the tea. I was sipping it and it spilled all over my clothes. That was good. That was really good. I really don't have a lot to say about it, except for the fact that I just can't wait to see how things continue to go and see how Feng Xiao responds to the grandfather and his offering. I mean, of course, he don't want Cui Xu, but whatever. Also, the only thing I'm going to say, I knew that man's poem was going to be awful. As soon as he said that he was going to do a poem, I was like, nah, this is going to be terrible. But I thought it was very smart and witty on his part to be like, you just said it had to be exceptional. You didn't say it had to be exceptionally good or exceptionally bad. So, I mean, I should still win the Sither, right? That was funny. I cannot lie. But anyway, like I said, I don't really have anything to say. I just want to go ahead and get to the next few chapters. So we'll see what happens next time. You guys, I'm thinking we can finish this on Friday. Given my schedule, it may be a thing where I release my 10:30 Eastern Standard Time video on Friday, and then I'll probably read sometime later and release a late video, or I may just release it on Saturday, whatever. But we can finish this book this week and take some days break to kind of give myself, well, a break and clear my thoughts kind of sort of Peerless, so that we can move into Guardian, at least until we get the fourth book, which will come June 24th. And then once that comes, what I'll do is probably alternate releases between the two. Like one day it's Guardian, the next day it's Peerless. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I might just keep things regular and like pause on Guardian and then pick up book 4 and then go back to Guardian once we're done. We'll just have to see. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So, new names that were mentioned within the chapter, I'm going to review them with you. So the first one we have is Yuan Sheng, or Yuan Sansi. So Yuan, Shung, or Yuan Sansi. Si as in 2 O's for book. Then we have Tsah-oh. So Tsah-oh is going to be like the end of cats. Tsah-oh. Then we have Xie Lingyun. Xie Lingyun, Yuan. Tsway Shoo, Yue Gu. Those were the new names that were mentioned. Again, the pronunciation and everything is in the description, so you guys can look at those. I do really encourage you all, for those of you who want to continue reading Danmei and make your lives easier, again, I recommend you looking at my pronunciation video, but I also recommend you take notes on these pronunciations. That way you'll get used to them over time and kind of understand how names work. You don't have to know Mandarin in order to know like the certain patterns in names. So anyway, please, you guys, leave your thoughts and reactions in the comments. I can't wait to hear what you all have to say about these chapters. And yeah, I will see you all next time. Me.Mimo.